The preseason is here. Young guys are fighting for their spots, and there are some big questions that could shape the Vikings' future. So stick around, because there's more going on here than just one preseason game. And before we get into it, if you're riding with the Vikings, hit that like button and drop SKOL Vikes in the comments. Let's see how many Vikings fans are watching all the way through. There is one roster move involving the Minnesota Vikings that looks small on the surface, but it immediately creates a situation that is going to make fantasy football players, and probably plenty of Vikings fans, do a double take. Minnesota has added another running back, and yes, this is going to make the Jefferson situation even more confusing. The Vikings have signed running back Jermer Jefferson and waived running back Jordan Mims. And before anyone asks, this is not Justin Jefferson suddenly getting replaced, and it is not some massive change to the offensive depth chart. Jermer Jefferson is a running back, while Justin Jefferson remains the team's star wide receiver. But for a team preparing for the preseason opener against the New York Giants, every roster move matters, because these are exactly the opportunities where players on the bubble can separate themselves. Jermer Jefferson brings NFL experience to the competition. He was originally a seventh-round pick of the Detroit Lions in 2021 and has also spent time with the Tennessee Titans and Arizona Cardinals. The Vikings are now giving him another opportunity to compete for a roster spot, while Jordan Mims is the player who gets pushed out of the equation. And that brings us to something much bigger than one running back signing. The preseason is about to become a very important evaluation period for Minnesota. The Vikings have several young players who could make this preseason extremely interesting, particularly on defense. One name that continues to stand out is Charles Demings, the cornerback Minnesota selected in the 5th round of the 2026 NFL Draft. Another is Jake Golday, the linebacker taken in the 2nd round. Then you have Jacoby Thomas at safety, along with Caleb Banks and Dominique Orange up front. There is a reason these names keep coming up when talking about the Vikings' future. Minnesota invested heavily in defense during the 2026 draft, and now the coaching staff has to figure out which rookies are ready to contribute immediately and which ones need more time. Charles Demings, in particular, is one of the players worth watching closely when the Vikings take the field. The question is not simply whether he plays well. The bigger question is whether he can force the coaching staff to give him meaningful opportunities early in the season. Jake Golday is another fascinating case. The expectation is that Minnesota may not rush him into a major role immediately. His athletic profile gives him intriguing possibilities in Brian Flores' defense, but the Vikings have veteran players ahead of him, and development could be part of the plan. And then there is Jacoby Thomas, a player whose situation is much harder to predict. He could potentially push for playing time early, but there is also a realistic path where the Vikings decide to bring him along slowly. That's what makes the preseason so important. We are finally going to start seeing these rookies in situations where projections turn into actual football. But the biggest question hanging over this entire team isn't even about the rookies. It is the quarterback position. Minnesota enters this season with Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy competing for the starting job, with Carson Wentz and Max Brosmer also in the quarterback room. And while the immediate competition is already fascinating, the conversation about 2027 is where things get really wild. One projection discussed in the mailbag puts Kyler Murray at roughly a 30% chance of being the Vikings' starting quarterback in 2027, with Baker Mayfield at 15%, J.J. McCarthy at only 5%, a newly drafted quarterback at 25%, and another unexpected X-Factor quarterback at 25%. That is not a prediction carved in stone. It is a way of illustrating just how uncertain the long-term quarterback picture could become. The interesting part is that Murray is currently viewed as the slight favorite in that hypothetical, but even then, the field remains the preferred option. In other words, the belief is that the Vikings' 2027 starter could very well be someone who isn't currently on the roster. And that possibility becomes even more interesting when Baker Mayfield enters the conversation. The idea of Mayfield potentially reaching free agency has generated plenty of speculation. But there is an important financial element to understand. The discussion around Tampa Bay using the franchise tag on Mayfield is complicated by the salary cap consequences described in the original discussion. If the Buccaneers want to keep him, an extension could be the more realistic route rather than simply allowing him to play under the franchise tag. For Minnesota, that creates a fascinating hypothetical. If the Vikings decide their long-term answer at quarterback isn't already in the building, a quarterback with Mayfield's experience could become an option. But there is another name that could completely change the conversation: Kyler Murray. If Murray stays healthy and performs at a level that convinces Minnesota he deserves another contract, the entire 2027 quarterback equation changes. If he doesn't, the Vikings could suddenly be looking at a completely different path. And that is exactly why this preseason matters more than a simple win or loss against the Giants. Because Minnesota isn't just preparing for one game. The coaching staff is gathering information, and there is one rookie in particular who could give Vikings fans the clearest preview yet of what this new-look defense might become. That is Caleb Banks. Banks was Minnesota's first-round selection in the 2026 NFL Draft, taken 18th overall, and the expectations surrounding him are enormous. His combination of size and athletic ability gives him an extremely high ceiling, but the Vikings also know there is development involved. If Banks can stay healthy and translate those physical traits to the NFL, the upside is enormous. And now, Vikings fans are finally getting close to seeing these players compete under the lights. So let me know what you think. Which rookie are you watching most closely when Minnesota takes on the Giants? Caleb Banks, Jake Golday, Charles Demings, Jacoby Thomas, or somebody else entirely? Drop the name in the comments, because that answer could tell us a lot about which young player Vikings fans believe is ready to make an immediate impact. And while the rookie defensive class is one of the biggest reasons to watch this preseason, there is another storyline that could become extremely important before the Vikings even reach the regular season. Who ultimately emerges as the team's long-term answer at quarterback? The discussion around 2027 is already beginning, and one name that continues to stand out is Kyler Murray. The argument is simple. If Murray stays healthy and performs well enough to earn another contract, Minnesota could have a very clear reason to keep building around him. But if that doesn't happen, the Vikings could find themselves looking outside the organization for their next franchise quarterback. That is where Baker Mayfield becomes especially interesting. The possibility of Mayfield reaching free agency could create a major opportunity for Minnesota. There is no guarantee that happens, and there is certainly no indication that a deal with the Vikings is imminent. But the financial situation surrounding Mayfield and Tampa Bay could make the quarterback market extremely interesting when the time comes. And there is another possibility that might be even more unpredictable. The Vikings could simply draft a quarterback. The upcoming college football season could have a major impact on that decision. One quarterback being watched closely is adofo-mensah, who transferred to Miami after playing at Duke. The evaluation is still developing, but the potential is intriguing. Mensah has been compared stylistically to Jaden Daniels, while also being viewed as possessing a strong arm and the ability to process the game effectively. Then there are the bigger names already attracting attention, including Arch Manning and Julian Sayin. The point is not that Minnesota has decided on any of these quarterbacks. It hasn't. The point is that if the Vikings reach the 2027 offseason without a long-term answer, the quarterback class could give them multiple options. But before Vikings fans start looking that far ahead, There is an immediate question that needs to be answered. Can Minnesota start this season strong? The first real test comes in the preseason against the New York Giants. There is obviously a difference between a preseason game and a regular season matchup, but this game still matters for individual players fighting for roster spots and playing time. The Vikings are expected to have 4 quarterbacks with NFL game-winning experience available during the preseason: Kyler Murray, J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, and Max Brosmer. The Giants also have quarterbacks with experience, including Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston, and Brandon Allen. So this isn't simply a situation where Minnesota automatically has the advantage. Still, the expectation in the discussion was that the Vikings could come away with the victory. But honestly, the final score is not the most important thing. The real victory would be finding answers. Can Charles Demings show he deserves early playing time? Can Jacoby Thomas force his way into the rotation? Can Jake Gold show that he belongs in Brian Flores' long-term plans? And can the highly touted defensive rookies demonstrate that Minnesota's investment in the defense is already beginning to pay off? Those are the questions Vikings fans should be watching. There is also the intriguing situation surrounding Harrison Smith. At this point, there is no new information confirming what Smith has decided about his future. Smith previously indicated that when he eventually decided to retire, he might not make a major announcement. He could simply walk away. That leaves the door open to multiple possibilities. He could already be finished with football. Or, if the Vikings are playing meaningful football later in the season, Smith could potentially decide that he wants another opportunity to return and make a playoff push with a defense he knows extremely well. For now, though, there is nothing new to report, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes the Vikings so fascinating right now. There are questions everywhere: quarterback, rookies, veteran depth, and even the possibility of unexpected changes down the road. But one thing is certain: the preseason is about to start giving us real answers. So now I want to hear from you. Which storyline are you most interested in watching unfold? Is it Kyler Murray and the future of the quarterback position? The possibility of Baker Mayfield becoming available? Or the young defensive players fighting for their roles? Leave your opinion in the comments and tell me which Vikings player you believe could surprise everyone this season. Go, Vikings!